Welcome to this week's edition of Special Prosecutor with Larry Klayman. We have a very special guest, Ambassador Alan Keyes. He was a UN ambassador. He ran for president. He ran against Barack Obama for Senate. He's a brilliant man. His intellect is at the level of a founding father. Frankly, I wish that he was president of the United States. And in fact, when he did run, he actually told everybody that he would make me his attorney general if he did succeed. I told him, I said, Alan, don't waste that nomination because I could never get through the U.S. Senate, okay? Because I was suing all of them, frankly, at the time. So there's some humor in this. But in any event, let's talk about what's happening right now. Just last Friday, our so-called Secretary of State, who looks like he's seen a ghost every time he appears with anyone, whether it's an Arab leader or an Israeli leader or you name it. This guy is a Yale-educated, studied philosophy, which obviously doesn't prepare you to get into the national security world. He was in the Obama administration. He helped with the false narrative that the whole Hunter Biden bribery scandal was just simply Russian false information. The guy's dishonest to the core. But today he comes out doing the bidding of Joe Biden, who's now thrown Israel under the bus, playing into the hands of the likes of CNN, the Communist News Network, Al Jazeera, the whole lot of them on the left, and also, those Arab interests who are not exactly neutral, and says that there are far too many Palestinians that have been killed, suggesting that the war should end right now. Biden's playing both sides of the street. His party is fractured over this. He has now allowed the Iranians to attack American military bases over 40 times. Tens of Americans have been injured, some with serious brain injury. And what does he do? He bombs what's in effect like a garbage dump, an ammunition dump, and that's it. Iranians get to do whatever they want. I've been saying in podcasts this week that this is a golden opportunity to take Iran out, to take the leadership out, the supreme leader, to take those in the Iranian Revolutionary Guard and their military facilities. We tried to provoke something with the Gulf of Tonkin in Vietnam. That was a phony false flag. But this one is not phony. The Republicans, a Freudian slip. The Iranians have attacked us, and we have a right to respond. So I say, let's use this opportunity and take the Iranian regime out. And we would have support, not just with Israel, but Saudi Arabia would like to see them dead too, because the Iranians want to take over Saudi Arabia. They want the oil. Saudi Arabia has Mecca, of course, which is, the epicenter of Islam. The Saudi Arabians are Sunni Muslims. The Iranians are Shiite Muslims. They hate each other. They hate each other almost as much as the Iranians hate the Jews, or Hamas, or Hezbollah, or Islamic Jihad. And now is the time to do it before the Iranians get a significant number of atomic weapons. I believe they already have some, but not enough to take us out. We've got aircraft carriers. We've got atomic submarines. We've got destroyers in the Mediterranean and the Red Sea. It's time to use them. And let's just level the playing field right now, so to speak, and move on and get rid of Iran once and for all. But I want to also talk about what's been going on in the elections, and Alan Keyes is going to talk about that because we've talked before the show. The Republicans, again, have snatched defeat out of the jaws of victory. And notwithstanding that they really don't have any principles, and people are beginning to understand that all their little dog and pony shows up there with investigations are just that, to raise money. In fact, this week it was announced they're going to subpoena Hunter Biden and James Biden. They won't get anything out of them because, number one, they won't show up for a number of months. And when they do, they'll take the Fifth Amendment simply for fundraising. That lack of principle is what is causing the Republicans to lose. And look at these corrupt judges, of the U.S. District Court for the District of Columbia in particular, that force peaceful protesters down on their knees to make forced confessions, ironically, as if this were Iran, or were the former Soviet Union, or Russia today, or China, or God knows where else. The Judiciary Committee, run by Jim Jordan, hasn't sought to impeach one judge. He's head of the Judiciary Committee. He shouldn't be because he's not a lawyer, so he has a limited understanding of what the whole thing is about. All he does is he shoots his mouth off. Even his own colleagues didn't trust him. That's why he's not speaker anymore. But how do you explain that Biden's popularity is so low that even the Democrats are now calling for him to step down. And the Republicans can't win a simple election or can't debate the abortion issue with any clarity so it doesn't, in fact, taint these elections. Because we know that a lot of women voted on the basis of the fact that they want the right to kill unborn babies. It's unbelievable. The women in this country have to be held accountable in a number of ways. We've had the Me Too movement, for years. It's less strong than it was before. A man is, of course, guilty unless proven innocent. That's true in family law proceedings. It's true right across the board. But now is the time for women, and not all women, okay, but they're apparently in the suburbs, the majority of women that would care more about their right to kill a baby than the fact that we have a Justice Department that's a Gestapo, that we have rampant crime, that we have food prices and gas prices, our economy's collapsing, you can't put decent food on the table. And you have, of course, our military, which has poor morale and has been destroyed. We got open borders with drug traffickers, human traffickers, sex traffickers, you name it, running across the border, terrorists with a likely terrorist attack. And for these women, the fact that they can kill a baby whenever they feel like it, that's the most important issue. This is an outrage. And these women who vote that way, and these men that vote that way as well, need to be held accountable. Do you think that God is just watching what's going on and says, oh, that's fine, no problem? You want a good reason why this country is on its knees and very close to destruction is because of the lack of Judeo-Christian values. And of course, you can see that now in Ivy League schools, where Hamas terrorists are celebrated. And after they lopped off the heads of 40 babies. Is that much different than killing a baby in the womb? And the Democrats would like to do it right up to the point of birth. I don't see much difference. And we're going to talk about that with Alan Keyes as well, Dr. Alan Keyes. Then let's talk about what's going on in the Trump trial. I was very impressed, and I rarely am, because Trump really has had lousy lawyers up to this point in time. It's one of the reasons that he's in the deep you-know-what, because he hired lawyers based upon watching them on Fox News, or God knows where else he found them. Or he had people like Tom Fitton giving him legal advice who's not a lawyer, that got him, gave the Democrats license to do what they're doing. But this is a serious situation. But this woman, Alina Habba, his lawyer in this trial in New York City before Judge Erganon, or however his name is pronounced, who's persecuting the president, got up and gave a great speech outside of the courthouse and said many of the same things that I've been saying for many years about the judiciary and how they run roughshod. She got one thing wrong, however. I'm going to embed her little speech with this radio show when I send it out. She says, well, these judges just simply are out of control, and it's a large part based on the fact that they're elected politicians, on the state court system. Well, I got some, I want to actually communicate with her because I do admire what she said. And she's the first decent lawyer that Trump's had, frankly. And I thought she gave an excellent speech outside of the courthouse when the judge shut her down and wouldn't let her talk and wouldn't let President Trump talk. But it's not so much the state court judges. Yeah, they are a problem. You get some bad people in there that are politicians. But as Jefferson said, federal judges, unelected, unaccountable to the people, would become despots and tyrants, causing us to shed the blood of patriots and tyrants every 20 years or so, adding what's a few thousand dead to refresh the tree of liberty. The biggest problem domestically in this country today are federal judges. Not all of them, but the majority of them. And you see them, particularly in the District of Columbia and New York City, who think they can do whatever they want. They don't care about the law. They're there for life, so they think. They're not really. They serve for good behavior. But then you have people like these hacks, Jim Jordan, that won't do anything about it. Won't impeach them, won't call them in to testify, won't do anything. And they're forcing January 6th protesters and others to get down on their knees, to plead guilty, to make forced confessions. And this is infecting the entire society, our whole politic, because most people, not Larry Klayman, not someone who can fight back against these judges or bar associations in DC or New York, and all the other forces that are trying to destroy conservative advocacy, and the ability of people to try to make change in a positive way. But most people in this country are scared, and they will not stand up to the establishment. And the extent to they're engaged, it's simply to watch Fox News, and that's enough, or to read a book, even my own book, It Takes a Counter-Revolution, Wake Up America. I give my manifesto on how we can save this country. It's not enough just to talk and to watch TV. So I hope people will go to freedomwatchusa.org, contribute to our cause with tax-deductible contributions. We are your Justice Department. We are unafraid. I gave an announcement last Friday. Call Mike Johnson. I gave the telephone number to call. Check it out on our website at the Capitol and tell him he should send the Capitol Police over now and arrest Joe Biden. He's been convicted of bribery from Communist China, Ukraine, and Russia by a citizens' court that was administered by yours truly and Freedom Watch, your Freedom Watch. So I implore you, please help us. We need the help. We need it financially. We're not doing terribly well right now. The Republicans are siphoning away contributions. Go to freedomwatchusa.org, and you can see that if you're going to rely on them, you can forget it. They can't even win an election during the worst period of American history. Stay tuned. I'll be right back with Dr. Alan Keyes, a great man. Listen to him carefully, because these are the kinds of people that we need in a new government in this country. The old government is bankrupt and should be simply thrown out peacefully and legally. Be right back. Stay tuned. I'm back with Alan Keyes, my very good friend of a long time, probably the most intelligent person out there. I always said that I thought Alan should be president. We certainly could use him today, but he's not available, unfortunately. I'll tell you why. But he's also, having run for president himself against Barack Obama, if you can believe that. Was that president or was it Senate, Alan?
Senate. That was a Senate campaign.
Yeah, but you did run for president as well, and he's former UN ambassador. So I want to bring Dr. Keyes on. He is extremely knowledgeable, and I want to get his take initially on what happened with the Republican elections the other day. Why did the Republicans fall flat again?
Well, I think it's partly because the Democrats are always ready to talk about the issue of abortion, right? And Republicans tend, in that situation, when they're being beaten about the head and neck by the Democrats over the abortion issue, they'll shy away from it. But of course, that's going to affect the enthusiasm of their base. So when the Democrats are talking loudly about how we need to accept abortion, Republicans should be talking even more loudly about what a travesty it is and a total violation of the premises that are true all the way back to the beginning. You know, the first thing we have to observe is the God-endowed right to life, which is then the basis for all of us of all the rights. But they don't do that, and I don't know why. They never tend to make the best arguments for their position when the Democrats are attacking them. Instead, they try to talk about something else or shy away from it. I don't know, as if somebody's not going to notice, but that's stupid. And yet it's the stupid strategy they always follow, because I think a lot of them aren't even sincerely convinced about the issue of abortion, because they no longer think of it in terms of the Declaration principles.
Well, you're a very principled person, Alan. So based on that, what do you think the argument should be by the Republicans?
Well, the argument is actually very simple. That the first thing that the Declaration talks about is the right to life, and this has been the bedrock basis of it all throughout. It's not just a question of are you killing babies. It's a question of are you respecting the fundamental premise of the society, because the first right that is enumerated in the Declaration is the right to life for all of us. But if you have, I hope people have noticed that as we denigrate the supremacy of that right as the condition of our exercise of all the other rights, we're actually producing politicians and a government that actually believes that they can abuse the power in order to disregard our rights. And I think the cavalier attitude they took during the pandemic is proof of the fact that deterioration is already advanced of quite a lot. I think we have a sense in this country now that life is not, in fact, the precious commodity that government is, in the first instance, expected to protect and preserve.
Well, there's been a lot of talk. At what point should a abortion be illegal? I personally believe from conception, but let's take it a step back a little bit. At a minimum, when the heart starts beating, which is about 6 weeks. But yet you have there's some Republicans out there saying, such as the governor of Virginia, 15 weeks, and you have other things out there, and it confuses people. And frankly, there's no firm position on anything at this point. And obviously that has contributed. So if it was you, if you were running for president again, what would you advocate?
Well, I've always taken the position that except if the question of whether or not, if the mother's life is endangered in some way, but this is a very rare instance, I always try to make that point. I think that's the only instance in which there is a question about whether or not you should be murdering innocent life. You should never murder innocent life on the basis of one's convenience, on the basis of one's whims. There's a responsibility to respect it, because otherwise you denigrate that responsibility when it comes to the rest of us. So that when it's convenient, is that what we're going to say now? If it's a convenience for the woman and she gets to kill an innocent human being, when it's convenient for the polity, should we kill innocent human beings? Because throughout most of human history, that was taken for granted.
Absolutely not. We're going to be right back with Alan Keyes. Stay tuned. I'm back with Ambassador Alan Keyes, Senate candidate against Barack Obama, presidential candidate, someone who has the stature and knowledge of one of our founding fathers, one of the few that's had it since then. Alan, I remember in law school, I went to Emory Law School in Atlanta. I was in the same class with Sally Blackman, whose dad, Harry Blackman, wrote Roe v. Wade, the majority opinion on that. And so I remember standing up in class. So you're going back to in the early 80s, actually. And it was actually 1970s, as a matter of fact. In 1974, I matriculated at Emory. I'm losing track getting up there. And I would get up and I'd say, look, what is it about this whole debate at the time that gives a woman exclusively the right to choose to kill an unborn baby? Don't men have a say in this? And secondly, what gives them a right to kill generally? And, in those days, people weren't so strident. You could actually have a discussion about it. But you just, hit the nail on the head. And of course, we have clinics out there that will help mothers come to term. Jerry Falwell used to have that at Liberty University. Others have had it. Help you get the baby adopted if you don't want to keep it. To me, there's little excuse for killing a baby. And I have to hearken. See, and this is I want to ask you about this. We talked about this before the show, is that there are so many women in this country, not all women, but this is the primary issue for them. It's the primary issue, despite the fact that the Justice Department has been turned into a Gestapo, that we have rampant crime, we have open borders, that we have fentanyl killing kids and everything else. That we're in what is in effect the Third World War at this point, the beginning of it. Yet their big issue here is I want to have the right to kill a baby. And I think women need to take responsibility here. And I wonder what your take is on this phenomenon, that they put that issue above all others. And this is why the Republicans, notwithstanding their own lack of principles and haplessness, continue to lose elections. But I want to get your feelings.
Well, see, I always think that we ought to put this in terms that bring it home, not just to women, but to men and everybody else who's human. When is it okay for us, for the sake of our convenience, our decision that this isn't right for us at the moment, for this or that to be done, when do we get to kill innocent people in pursuit of maintaining that stance? When do we get to do it? Well, I think most of us recognize that we don't get to do it at all under our laws if you're dealing with full-grown human beings. But I would argue if the premise of respect for life depends on the decision of an individual human being about whether or not something is going to be for their convenience or is going to serve their purposes. When you have the interest of the whole people, as evidenced by a government at any level, right? The whole town, the whole city, and so forth and so on. Shouldn't we just be able to kill each other when you get enough people on your side so that the other side can be killed? Because that's the premise of the abortion issue. If you're in a position of power over somebody else, you get to kill that person for the sake of your goals. But that's anathema to the American way of life. The right to life is a protected right. Yes?
Yes, and
it's one of those things that you have to respect. And if you don't have cause, which is basically that person is breaking the law and endangering the lives of others. If you don't have that cause, you don't get to go around killing people. Well, and they think that when they make the exception for the innocent child, they're not endangering that logic for themselves. But of course they are, because that's the whole premise, by the way, of all of the governments that we have fought against, Hitler, fascism, all of these governments, including communism, by the way, that when you're inconvenient, those who have more power than you get to kill you, whether you're Uyghurs or whoever you might be. I thought if we don't reject that, then we, in fact, are basically opening ourselves to that kind of slaughter. And I think the people who are the powers that be, who are trying to push us in the direction of that kind of totalitarian disregard for human life as such, I think we're walking down the road where we're all going to get it. And during the pandemic, I hope people were thinking about this, because that's precisely the circumstance in which they're going to turn to you and say, well, in the interest of the general public, we get to kill millions of people. As
that may sound extreme, Alan, but we just are in a war. We're in a potential third world war with regard to Israel, Hamas, Iran, Syria, a lot of these countries in the Middle East. And what triggered it? Chopping off the heads of young kids, 40 kids in Israel chopped off. Is there much of a difference between, this abortion where the Democrats think that you should have a right to kill right up to birth, and what Hamas did? I mean, I realize that's an extreme position here.
Well, but is it? It's not so extreme that elements of the anti-American Democrat Party didn't go out and demonstrate in favor of it. In other words, all this business about because we're opposed to the existence of Israel, therefore we get to slaughter Israelis, right? That's basically the premise of all the people who were demonstrated in support for Hamas. And I think Americans and everybody, if they had any sense, we live under an understanding that makes the taking of innocent human life a crime against God, right? So it's the highest authority in the universe that says, no, you don't get to do that. And the only time there's an exception is when your own life is in play because of the attack of another, right? And then you get to defend yourself, which the Israelis are doing. So they're precisely in the position where you actually then get to wage war against somebody who has come in and destroyed innocent life in your community, which is what Hamas did. But that is why the issue of abortion, which is when do you get to take innocent life, is relevant for all of us. Because once you establish the premise that it all depends on your relative position of power and whether or not you can enforce your superior will on others, the way the mother enforces her will and convenience on the baby, if that's applied to all of us, what happens to us? We get slaughtered. And that, by the way, is not an academic position, because it's the principle at work in all the slaughters by all the communist regimes that we saw in the 20th century. Do people not?
We have a communist regime here. Speaking of which, just last Friday, our Secretary of State, you went to Harvard, he went to Yale. Unfortunately, we're going to talk about that as well, what's been going on in these Ivy League campuses. I went to Duke. Not much different, frankly. But our Secretary of State threw Israel under the bus on behalf of Biden, says there's far too many deaths of the Palestinians. It has to stop. And, I regret that too. I don't want to see Palestinians killed, but you have to remember that 80% of Gazans voted for Hamas. There has to be some collective responsibility. No one wants to see anybody hurt. But unless they reach a point where the pain gets great enough that they can control the way they vote and to vote others into power, assuming that's possible once Israel eliminates Hamas, then we're not going to be able to turn the corner. So in my view, I know I'm shifting subjects here, but I don't see that a ceasefire, frankly, and I don't see that 6-hour pauses or anything else does anybody any good in the long run. I want to get your thoughts.
Well, the problem is that when Biden and all these people, and they talk about, well, let's have a ceasefire. Let's have a ceasefire. Well, the motive for Hamas's attack was that you have to go eliminate Israel. And if the Israelis want to defend the existence of their country, then you have to kill them, right? That's the premise. And you must not be sidetracked by the fact that that basic premise is what you have to consider when you're judging about the right of Israel to defend itself. And what Netanyahu essentially said from the beginning was that we can't tolerate this periodic slaughter. Are we supposed to sit back and take it, or do we have the right to eliminate the threat so that we don't have to go through it again? And I think no American would say that a sovereign state doesn't have the right, if it is being attacked gratuitously by its neighbors, whether it was Mexico or somebody else. What stand do you think we would take? I think we would take.
We already took it. We took it at Hiroshima. We took it in Dresden, in Germany. Unfortunately, there's collateral damage in any war. No one wants to see it, but it happens. And, it was very convincing for the Japanese, not just to end the war, but to get their act together going forward, that this happened to their country. And, they talk about collective punishment. I'm not in favor of collective punishment either, but my point was, let's remember the Gazans voted for Hamas. In the words of Toyota, you asked for it, you got it, Toyota. So right now, the goal should be to end this war as quickly as possible, and that will save lives, just as dropping a bomb on Hiroshima saved lives in the long run.
It'll save lives in the long run, and insofar as lives are endangered by what the Israelis are doing right now, it is because Hamas set Gaza up in such a way as to hold Gazans hostage against an Israeli attack. That's why they built their military structures underneath the places where the Gazans lived, so that when Israel attacked, those people would be held hostage, and you discourage the attack because then they're going to be beaten about the head and neck for killing civilians. But that is the fault of the people who set that up in the first place, so that they are essentially using their population as cannon fodder. And the reason that the civilian deaths are occurring now, it's twofold. One, that the Hamas is preventing them from getting out of the way, because Israel has from the get-go said, get out, go south, because we're going to be attacking their infrastructure. We're going to attack the Gaza, and we have to eliminate the threat. So I don't understand why people are not recognizing that the Israelis are doing exactly what we had to do during the Second World War to defeat the Germans. They would locate their factories and other components for sustaining their military machine in cities, right? So we had to bomb the cities. Otherwise, we weren't going to end the war. And so when the enemy sets it up in that way, the responsibility for the deaths that occur is with that callous enemy, which basically sets its people up as cannon fodder.
Let me ask you this, Alan.
The attack.
To what extent do people bear responsibility for the government they have? I think we Americans bear a responsibility that we have Joe Biden and these other clowns in office right now. In fact, they're worse than clowns, they're criminals. So this is a philosophical discussion. You are a philosopher in many ways, but I think, does the populace bear a responsibility for what's happening right now?
Well, you're right. one respect, and it's decisive, I think. When the people of Gaza chose Hamas, Hamas had the stance that it has had up until this day, that the aim of the existence of Hamas is to eliminate Israel. So they voted in support of that. And now we're supposed to say, well, they're innocent somehow. They're not innocent if they voted in support of the government that is now pursuing that objective by launching a war against Israel, which is what they did on October 7th. So you're exactly right.
Yeah, and that's another issue. Alan, we've got about 30 seconds left. If you could hang on for the verdict section, let's talk a little bit about our so-called Justice Department right now, because we were discussing that as well, and how basically everything is falling apart at this point in time, including our legal system. We'll be right back with Alan Keyes for the verdict of Special Prosecutor with Larry Klayman. Until then, go to freedomwatchusa.org, contribute to our cause with tax-deductible contributions. We need your help. We are your Justice Department. Stay tuned. We're back, fellow patriots, those who believe in the vision and creation of our founding fathers, those people of faith that actually have some sense of right and wrong and principles. And I'm back with Alan. Alan, what do you think the verdict for this country is right now? Where are we headed? Are we headed into a potential nuclear holocaust? Do you think that we can have Biden in power for another year and a half and survive? Honestly, I know you're an honest person, so you'll give us an honest answer, but I'm saying that rhetorically. I don't see how this guy can lead us through this period. And recently, we indicted Biden for the bribery from Communist China, Ukraine, and Russia. We then tried him. He was sentenced to 20 years in prison along with his son and his brother. We have asked Speaker of the House, Michael Johnson, to have him arrested. District of Columbia, if you just know of someone who committed a crime, a felony, a citizen can make an arrest. Here we actually have convictions. So I've petitioned Mike Johnson to send the Capitol Police over and arrest Biden right now. Somebody's got to get rid of this guy before we all go down the drain. But quite apart from that, and I've called on people to call Johnson today in another podcast to urge that, not that that'll happen, but we're making a point. How do you see our current legal system and how that affects the future of this country?
Well, I think we obviously know that it's been weaponized against Donald Trump, so that they are abusing the judicial power in order to essentially fabricate crimes that have no existence. They don't really exist. The things that he's being accused of are not things that actually warrant criminal proceedings. And saying that somebody has committed a crime because they question the outcome of an election in the United States of America is absurd, because we all know that people have always questioned the outcome of elections when they thought they were crooked in America, and to do so is not a crime. So it's all that part of it is just silly if you really examine it. It has no basis in logic or fact. And the other thing that I find is that the people who they claim were insurrectionists, people who actually went into the Capitol and did damage, right? They are guilty of a delict. They violated the law when they, if and when they willfully destroyed property in the Capitol. But two things are true. From my reading, starting all the way at the time it was occurring, I think it was pretty clear that most of the damage didn't occur because the people going into the Capitol committed the damage. It occurred because others were committing damage as they were dealing with those people. And some of those others, I think, were plants and other things to suggest that the whole thing was intended to create an impression that was false about what Donald Trump was doing, because all Donald Trump did was give a speech, which he had a perfect right to give, and in which he did not say anything that warranted going and doing violence to the Capitol or anybody else. So I think that the Democrats are to blame for the delicts that occurred, if they did occur, wholeheartedly and pretty much all together. And that's why she didn't want the National Guard to be mobilized. She wanted the D.C. police and the Capitol Police, who are under her control, Pelosi, so that she could stage what was essentially a false flag event.
Yeah. Well, and they use this as an excuse now to implement a police state. I call the Justice Department the Gestapo currently.
And those, people who are a little bit familiar with how these communist regimes behave when they come to power will recognize that this is standard practice. You know, you just fabricate excuses so that you can put your opponents in show trials and either banish them to the gulag or kill them. And this is the mentality of the Democrat Party. They're actually an anti-American party now because they've rejected all the premises that should safeguard individuals, whether in politics or outside of politics, from this kind of abuse of power.
Alan, we have about 30 seconds. Tell people how they can reach you and what you're doing today.
These days, I do a show on Brighteon.tv at 2 o'clock in the afternoon. It's called Let's Talk America, and I have guests on, and we talk about a range of subjects. So you can always track me down Monday through Friday of 1 week, and then 3 days of the next week. It's a kind of cycle, and you can track me down at Brighteon TV at 2 o'clock in the afternoon.
That's great. Well, Alan is truly one of the really intelligent people in body politics, that I urge you to follow his show. Alan, thank you, my good friend, for coming on. God bless you.
For having me on. Appreciate it very much.
Yeah, and we'll talk some more. Take care and have a great weekend.
Take care of yourself. Bye-bye.